Hey guys, I'm back to milk more out of my Simpsons ranking. Growing up, some of my favorite episodes of the popular long-running show The Simpsons were the Anthologies. Probably because I was a dumb kid and had a low attention span, but it's always been a fun little sub-series to look back upon. Anthologies were episodes that would be separated into 3 different stories, the most common of these being the Treehouse of Horrors. I know it's not Halloween yet, get off my back. These were harsh, non-canon takes on the Simpsons family that could be darker, funnier, and even try its hand at actual horror sometimes. The golden age of The Simpsons would rarely do anthologies outside of the Treehouse of Horror series, and those were some of the best episodes of the whole show. But around season 10, they started doing more. Not even horror-themed ones. The series became oversaturated with anthologies to the point where Treehouse of Horror was no longer a special occasion. Why did they do this? Well, anthologies pretty much replaced clip shows as they were cheaper to make. Somehow. I mean, I don't get it. Don't you have to make new character designs and models for that shit? Wouldn't it be more expensive if... I don't know. You want to know what's even crazier, though? The time the series started doing more anthologies lines up perfectly with where most people consider The Simpsons to begin its decline in quality. What? So today we're going to take a look at Simpsons anthologies and how their issues were representative of the series as a whole. But before we get into that, I'd like a moment to talk about this video's sponsor. Well, I guess we have no choice but to start at the beginning. The first ever anthology episode by The Simpsons was Treehouse of Horror all the way back in season 2, guaranteeing that the series number would never catch up to the season number. Unless they do like 2 in 1 year, but that would be ridiculous. The first ever 7-minute segment was Bad Dream House, and it's your pretty run-of-the-mill haunted house story. The Simpsons move into a big new home, it is haunted, they try to live peacefully, then the house kills itself. It's fine. It's pretty indicative of the show as a whole around this time. It's weird coming back to this one to seeing how subtle the kind of horror they were going for was. The humor was a lot more laid back, focusing more on creative, spooky vibes. This isn't the off-the-walls comedy we expect from the show, but the few jokes that this one has are pretty funny for the most part.
You didn't tell me it was built on an Indian burial ground! Well, that's not my recollection. Yeah, well, all right, goodbye. He says he mentioned it 5 or 6 times.
The colors on the alien one have always looked a bit off to me. Like they're grilling at the dead of night right now? That doesn't seem like a very good decision. But this one introduced another Treehouse of Horror mainstay, Kang and Kodos. In fact, I'm pretty sure they've had a cameo in all of them. They aren't quite as evil as they are portrayed later. In fact, here, they just want to make peace with the humans, no matter how much dust was on that stupid book. Like, come on, who wrote this thing? But perhaps the strangest segment here would have to be The Raven, which is just taking the story already written by Edgar Allan Poe and interpreting it themselves. But the segment actually establishes the mood very well. I've always loved the score to this one in particular. It's so eerie, I love it. All the segments are nicely wrapped together by some in-betweens that are Bart and Lisa telling stories in the treehouse. Get it?! I think that's still like the idea behind these, that the stories are being told by the Simpsons themselves, but they eventually give up on doing wraparounds, so yeah. It's weird coming back to these, seeing that they were still called Simpsons Halloween Specials. Like, those weren't the episode titles, but if you weren't a nerd back then in the 90s, you probably wouldn't know. They kept that name up until the 13th entry, if I remember correctly, and I really prefer Treehouse of Horror. It's not the most generic title you could apply to any TV show ever, at the very least. Now, this was a pretty solid start to the series, but Treehouse of Horror 2 established this as an annual event. It's an improvement on the original for sure. It doesn't have the same vibes as the first one, but it more than makes up for it with the writing and comedy. That kind of continued as the series went on, as a matter of fact. Treehouse of Horror 3 isn't really scary, but it is significantly funnier.
Did you barricade the door?
Why? Oh, the zombies. No.
And at this time, they didn't really need to be anything more than that. I mean, if their goal is to make you laugh and they succeed, then I don't think there should be much to complain about. Especially since Treehouse of Horror 3 was definitely the best one so far at the time. The show as a whole was growing more zany and humorous around this time. Season 4 was the same season with Marge vs. the Monorail or Last Exit to Springfield, episodes that are the ultimate joke fests. So it makes sense that the Treehouse of Horrors would reflect that. This trend continued into Treehouse of Horror 4, another great entry in the series that was better than the last. And then we have Treehouse of Horror 5. This episode was smack right in the middle of Season 6, which I personally consider to be the best and most consistent season of the show. And Treehouse of Horror 5 is not only one of the best episodes of Season 6, it's a top 10 episode of the entire series. I know I put it at like number 12 in my ranking, but I can change my mind. Treehouse of Horror 5 starts out with the f***ing shinning. Come on, you know this one is peak. An excellent parody of the events played out in the movie, followed by Time and Punishment, which is one of the funniest 7 minutes The Simpsons has ever put together. And then we have Nightmare Cafeteria. Oh my god. Due to the amount of children in detention and the school lunch budget being low, Principal Skinner decides that the best decision is to cannibalize the kids in detention. Jesus Christ. It's perfectly mixed between implied and shown violence to the point where it's actually kind of terrifying. Just to end with a cute little musical number where the Simpsons get infected by a fog that turns you inside out. This segment is hilarious, scary, well-written, well-boarded. This is the best that Simpsons anthologies get. After reaching a peak in Season 6, there's an argument to be made that the decline of anthologies started immediately after. And I disagree with that statement for now at least. Treehouse of Horror 6 isn't as good as 5, but there's still a lot of great moments and segments in here, like Nightmare on Evergreen Terrace and Homer Cubed. But Season 7 is where we get our first non-Halloween themed anthology. That being 22 short films about Springfield. Compared to other anthologies, however, this one's very different. Each segment is only about a minute, switching perspectives around all the citizens of Springfield. It shows a lot of confidence in the Simpsons characters that they can all hold segments on their own. And it's another great episode, even if it's not a personal favorite by any means. Season 8 brought us Treehouse of Horror 7, and admittedly I'm not the biggest fan of this one. The first and last segments are good. The Thing and I introduces Hugo, Bart's secret twin brother, which is a pretty neat, pretty creepy segment. Citizen Kane offers a really solid election commentary. You know, these things would air like a week before Election Day in America, so why not make use of the Halloween special to offer a neat little time capsule? It's just the Genesis tub I'm not as into. It's the start of Treehouse of Horror leaning more into sci-fi than actual horror, and while it does have a handful of funny moments, it's not really engaging. But hey, still a good Treehouse of Horror overall, even if I'd consider it to be the weakest one so far.
Why, you've probably never even seen your own face in the mirror, have you?
Season 8 also brought us the Simpsons spin-off Showcase. I was surprised to come back to my ranking and see how high I put this one up. I put it at number 60 above a lot of Treehouse of Horrors I'd consider to be better. Perhaps I just have a certain fondness for Season 8. It's definitely the show's most experimental season, even if its anthologies aren't quite at their peak. And now we're at Season 9. Uh-oh. This is where most people consider the golden age to end. Do I agree with that statement? I think 1 through 8 are the best ones, but 9 still has a ton of great episodes I'd consider golden. But if I include seasons 9 or 10, then I'd probably just go through 1 to 12. I think 12 is a better season than 10 and 11. That's still a very high level of quality. I'm getting off topic. Season 9 brought us Treehouse of Horror 8, and even more so than 7, I'm not as into this one. Again, it's a good episode. I like a lot of the jokes. The whole Mega Man is pretty good. And the Fly one is fine. It really is Easy Bake Coven that holds this one down for me. It's just this 16th century version of the Salem witch trials with Simpsons characters. And as we'll see going forward, random timeline switches become very prevalent in anthologies moving forward. Again, it's not a bad episode, it's still really good, but compared to the peaks of seasons 5 or 6, this one leaves much to be desired. Surprisingly though, season 9 didn't have any other anthologies. The show was destroying itself in other ways around then. But season 10 brought us 2 more. Treehouse of Horror 9 and Simpsons Bible Stories. One of these episodes I really like, and the other one kinda sucks. Treehouse of Horror 9 is a really solid entry in the series. Would I consider it to be the 9th best entry overall? Maybe, I don't know. Hell Toupee is really good. The Itchy and Scratchy segment is a lot of fun. Even if the Maggie Alien one doesn't quite stick the landing, this episode proved that Treehouse of Horror could still make solid content around this time. And Simpsons Bible stories prove that they can't make solid content around this time. It's the start of a rather lazy writing approach for this show. There are a lot of anthologies in these middle years that take these pre-established stories and just do it with Simpsons characters, without providing much parody to the source material. And it honestly comes off as really lazy, and that became the point of these episodes. As I mentioned in the beginning, these anthologies were somehow cheaper to produce, meaning they could replace clip shows. So these middle years are where the most anthologies would pop up. After a really good showing of Treehouse of Horror 10 in Season 11, Season 12 came in with the lowest episode count in years and the most anthologies, with 3 episodes being split into segments. Now, Treehouse of Horror 11 is alright, I guess. The Ghost Dad segment is really solid, the Dolphin one is good, but once again, it's that awkward one in the middle holding this back. The Trilogy of Error is actually incredible. This is probably my favorite episode of the show post-Golden Age, and I think it's the one that does the best job of using the anthology format, because it's all one big interconnected story, with Homer cutting off his thumb in a kitchen accident, rushing to the hospital to get it reattached, Lisa runs to school in order to turn in her science fair project Linguo, and Bart and Milhouse get involved with the mob. All of the segments colliding and affecting one another, and coming together by the end. It's an episode I can put on at any time and still have a great time with. The original idea was to do a Simpsons version of Run Lola Run, a movie with the same anthology structure, and I gotta say, this episode is much better than that movie. Run Lola Run is so style over substance and like 50% running, but this episode is so good, so funny, it's one of my favorite episodes of the entire show.
Isn't there anything you can do?
Well, I could cut off the other thumb for a sense of symmetry.
Symmetry, eh?
And then 4 episodes later, they ruined the nice streak they had going. Simpsons Tall Tales isn't even the worst anthology so far, but it's where you should probably stop watching The Simpsons as a whole. It's a collection of Tall Tales, but with Simpsons characters once again. They don't provide any parody on the subject matter. And then literally an episode later, Season 13 starts with Treehouse of Horror 12, which is without a doubt the worst one so far. The only segment I like here is the automated house one. That's a decent 2001 parody, but the one where Homer gets cursed is really boring, and the Harry Potter one comes off as generic, especially since the first Harry Potter movie wasn't even out at this point. Season 13 does have a handful of solid episodes, but it's where the show as a whole stopped being special for me. It was just average from this point forward. One of my least favorite episodes from that scene being Tales from the Public Domain. Can you guess why that one comes off as lazy? Treehouse of Horror 13 has one segment I really liked and the other 2 are just kinda boring. Season 14 thankfully didn't have any other anthologies besides that one, but Treehouse of Horror 14 was another one that just missed the mark for me. The Simpsons literally made fun of Family Guy being a clone of The Simpsons last Halloween to just steal one of their story ideas. Yep, the first segment in this one, Reaper Madness, is the exact same concept as the Family Guy episode Death is a Bitch. And they managed to make a much worse version. There was also Magical History Tour. I remember specifically watching this episode in the ranking thinking, I'm almost halfway done. Is this seriously what I'm watching right now? Because it is so unbelievably boring. I don't care about these stories. It's completely irrelevant that the Simpsons are in them. They are lazily written. They suck. And then season 17 proceeded to make 4 of them. The only good one of these is the seemingly never-ending story. The idea for it is basically a story within a story within a story, and it's actually pretty solid. But Treehouse of Horror 16 is one of the worst. Simpsons Christmas Stories is a lame Christmas special, and put a gun to my head, I could not name any of the stories in the wettest stories ever told. Things didn't improve after that. Treehouse of Horror 17 is boring trash. Each season would have one other anthology that was boring as hell, and life moved on. I mean, Treehouse of Horror 20 was pretty good. I liked that one, but the series would only sink lower and lower. One of the trends started around this time was to not just have 3 stories, but 4 stories instead. This was seen in The Fight Before Christmas, another really bad episode. Why put more effort into 3 7-minute stories when you could put less effort into 4 5-minute ones? You have significantly less time to put anything in your story, and it comes off as even more lazy than before. And this is best summarized by the absolute worst anthology The Simpsons has ever put out. Mo goes from rags to riches. This is one of my least favorite episodes of the entire show. There is next to nothing to like about this one. There is a whopping 5 stories, 4 of which revolve around Mo's famous bar rag and how it got to where it is today. Absolutely thrilling entertainment. Not to mention the other story with a Bart and Milhouse breakup that is by far the worst written thing in the entire series. Like, just watch this.
That's even sadder than being friends with Milhouse.
I'm getting tired of things like that.
Tired of what? I dump on you and you take it. That's how friendship works.
Not anymore. Friendship over.
That is how they break up. This is the problem when you don't have enough time to fit a proper story in there. It's gonna come off as rushed and forced. After this one, The Simpsons would seemingly slow down on anthologies. They would do a Treehouse of Horror every year of mostly mediocre quality. Sometimes they would have decent concepts, but their ability to execute would almost always be a failure. Until season 32. For some reason, that started with 3 in a row, but none of those were very special. I really miss when these were consistently great. The best Simpsons anthologies would take them in new and wacky directions. They could break boundaries that the regular episodes would never be able to. Treehouse of Horror 5 and Trilogy of Error are the best examples of this. They fit the vibes they were going for perfectly, as well as being hilarious and entertaining to watch. And I look at them now, and it's just not the same thing anymore. The anthologies became an excuse for lazy writing, and like the rest of the show, became boring and stale. However, season 27 brought us something interesting. Halloween of Horror is not an anthology, but it's The Simpsons' take on doing a full-length Halloween special, which they haven't done before. And that episode actually managed to be really great, teaching a really excellent message about fear and overcoming it. This was the first sign of The Simpsons becoming more experimental, and that would gradually continue into the coming years. Sure, Treehouse of Horror 29 and 30 are bland, terrible entries that resemble all the problems brought up before, but they got a little more comfortable trying new things, which really came about in season 34, where we got another full-length Halloween special in Treehouse of Horror 33. Not It wasn't that great, but it's still a neat idea to finally parody the 2 It movies, but Treehouse of Horror 33 is one of the best Treehouse of Horrors, period. The first segment with Marge being possessed and trying to kill Maggie is genuinely scary and well directed. They mixed up the art style with an excellent Death Note parody, and the final segment questioning the whole idea of the show going on for this long and becoming as popular as it has is just fantastic. As the series regained its quality, the Treehouse of Horrors did as well. Well, if we just ignore the next entry, which was my least favorite episode of season 35, but the fact that Treehouse of Horror 34 was the worst episode of that season just proves how good of a season that one was. Because it's not a bad episode, it's not even a bad Treehouse of Horror, just compared to the quality of the rest of the season, it didn't stand out very much for me. I only really liked the concept for the Sideshow Bob one, asking, what if he actually killed Bart all the way back in season 5? It takes advantage of the show going on for this long. No other show on television could do something like this. Sadly, the rest of the episode is held back by an opening segment about NFTs and Homer's toxic burps becoming a pandemic. Neither of these segments are even bad, just kind of weak. But I do have high hopes for the series moving forward. I don't think The Simpsons will ever be able to recapture the peak of Treehouse of Horror 5, but as long as they're willing to keep experimenting, we won't get something perfect, but we'll get something unique that only The Simpsons will be able to do. Or they could just keep increasing the amount of stories they do. I don't fucking care. I don't gotta watch this show anymore. I'm free!